Kieran, I think the COVID oversight committee being conducted by the Senate, chaired by my colleague Senator Katie Gallagher, is performing a really important public service here. That is, while Parliament's not sitting, it's important that we do have parliamentary oversight of what the government is doing right and where they are not delivering to the best interests of Australians and Australians' public health and our economic well-being. And you're right, there are things that the government has done right, and where they have, we've sought to be constructive and to support them. But if you look at the hearings that we've conducted so far, what did we find out today? Today, the government revealed that they've projecting that some 1 million people will join the welfare program in this country as a result of the economic crisis brought about by COVID-19. We've also heard that perhaps one of the most hapless ministers in this government, Stuart Robert, has struck again. You know, Stuart Robert, not content with downloading tens of thousands of dollars worth of data and charging it to the taxpayer, or presiding over the illegal robo-debt scheme, we found out today that his department never advised him that there had been a designated denial of service attack on the MyGov website, as hundreds of thousands of Australians were out trying to get access to income support as they were losing their jobs in the midst of this economic crisis. Stuart Robert said that the government's website had failed because it had come under attack by, I suppose, invisible hackers. As it turns out, he was wrong about that. What we found out today, his department never advised him of that. And quite frankly, it's simply not good enough as Australians are facing this unprecedented economic crisis to have a government minister who misleads, and then when he's caught out, simply shrugs his shoulders and says, my bad.
I'm wondering about this other finding that the committee came up with today about those using disability support services. They're paying 10% more for those services. Is the department going to look at that to try and remedy that situation? Obviously, the services are under greater demand right now in a remote sense. Will they look at that cost on those with disabilities?
Well, this is not something the government needs to remedy. This is actually the government's designed program. It's one of the measures the government has put in place to ensure that disability support providers can have enough funding in order to retain their workforce. And one of those measures includes charging people with a disability 10% more for certain services. But what the government's not doing is increasing the packages to people with a disability by 10%. So they've got the extra funding to pay that extra charge. So you end up in a circumstance where people with a disability on their NDIA plan are actually providing the funding out of their own NDIA plan to service providers who can help them keep their employees. Now, I asked the government today, are you going to increase the plans to people with a disability by 10% so they can cover this cost, this additional charge? And the government's response was, well, if people run out of money, they can come back and have their plan reviewed and maybe get an increase. They couldn't tell us how many people are requesting that. I know that when people with a disability go to have their plan reviewed, it often can take some considerable time. It is extraordinary, Kieran, that when we look at what this committee has brought forward this week, both in terms of superannuation, early access to that, as well as what we learned today around disability and people with a disability having to take money out of their own plans to pay this extra charge, it does seem like the lion's share of the money that is going out to help people right now in the midst of COVID-19 is coming from Australians themselves, from their own savings, from their own disability support packages. Now, that'll change in time, but one of the questions the committee continually asks is, why has it taken so long for the government support to get out to people who desperately need it now?
My colleague Andrew Clennell reported a couple of hours ago that Peter Dutton has given a verbal nod to the NRL to have an exemption for travel and then quarantining for the New Zealand Warriors to the NRL to get that piece of the puzzle in place pending final approval by health authorities. Do you support that move?
Well, look, this is a decision that's supposed to be taken by the National Cabinet tomorrow. And as I understand, what Andrew Clennell has broken today is that Peter Dutton went out and on his own moved ahead of the National Cabinet and the Prime Minister. And it would be really great if this National Cabinet and this federal government could all get on the same page, whether we're talking about schools or whether we're talking about the NRL. I mean, I love sport as much as the next person. I actually used to be in charge of a sporting body in this country, and I think it'd be great both for the community and for the country if we can get sport back up and operating safely and under medical conditions. But let me say this, Kieran. I got to say, I'm not particularly surprised that Peter Dutton would make a decision about whether or not a sports team can come in through the borders without consulting the National Cabinet or the Prime Minister. This is a guy, after all, who presided over the arrival of the Ruby Princess, 2,700 passengers disembarking when Australian Border Force was supposed to have direct command of arriving cruise ships. I really think Peter Dutton needs to stop playing the political games and the culture wars that he engages in so frequently and turn his mind to his actual job. Because what we are seeing is the border failure with the Ruby Princess has led to a significant outbreak in Tasmania. That was what was in the Tasmanian report today. If that is the case, and it appears to be the finding of this Tasmanian government report, this report from Tasmanian Health, that would take the Ruby Princess to over 800 cases of COVID-19 in Australia, over 30 deaths, and it would be responsible for this significant outbreak in Tasmania. And it just makes me ask, Kieran, how many more cases and how many more deaths are going to be linked back to the Ruby Princess?
But the minister has responsibility for the borders, and so isn't it within his right to say to Peter V'landys, the NRL Commissioner, the ARL Commissioner, that yes, you have approval pending a final health tick, which is via the National Cabinet tomorrow? He's not preempting that. He's basically said via the information we've got from Andrew today, Andrew Clennell, is that he is saying you've got a tick pending a final judgment. I know you want to have a political crack at him, but
no, actually, you know what? On this one, I got to say, I want to know what his health advice is. I mean, we saw Peter Dutton yesterday saying that Australian Border Force don't have the medical officers within their ranks. In fact, they actually do. But nonetheless, what is the medical advice that Peter Dutton is relying upon in making that decision? And if Andrew's reporting is correct, and I've got no reason to doubt that it is, he's an excellent reporter, why is the Prime Minister so cranky with Peter Dutton over this decision?
Now, you're a politician that's gone from state to federal. Any tips for John Barilaro as he is about to do the same?
Well, first, can I say, Kieran, that this is a really sad news today for the Australian Labor Party, for the Parliament, and I think for the country. The news that Mike Kelly is resigning for health reasons. I mean, Mike Kelly is a tremendous Australian. He has a level of public service that almost none of us who go into politics can imagine. We don't have many examples in the current Parliament of people coming from the military into politics. You know, Andrew Hastie, Jim Molan, and Mike Kelly are a few. But Mike Kelly has faced down danger. He has literally put his life on the line for the country. His lifelong service to our country and to our communities is just remarkable. And we all owe him a debt of gratitude, quite frankly. And the fact that his current health situation does arise from his time in the military and the service that he's given. I know how hard this decision has been for Mike, and I know that he really wrestled with it. And he wouldn't do this if it wasn't necessary. He is that dedicated to his local community there in Eden-Monaro, and we are all going to miss him as a colleague. He will remain a friend, but we will miss him as a colleague. And I think the Parliament will be a poorer place without him. Looking forward, obviously, in the Labor Party, we will have our own processes to nominate and endorse the candidate. for the upcoming by-election. As to John Barilaro, I don't think he's looking for advice from me. I suspect he may want to be talking this afternoon to people like Jim Mullen and Andrew Constance to test the waters as to whether or not they're going to throw their hat in the ring too.
Kristina Keneally, thanks for your time, appreciate it. And Mike Kelly absolutely has been a very good member of Parliament and much loved in that seat of Eden-Monaro.